Testing. Can you hear me now? All right, how that sound? Skeeter Man 218. Can you hear me? Testing. Okay, there we go. I can hear myself. All right, so we good. That's my bad. I didn't do my checking. Skeeter Man 218. So what's going on, everybody? Skeet, what up, though, cuz? How you doing today? Gonna wait for a few other people to join in before we start tonight's conversation. We're gonna be talking about this Karmelo Anthony trial, man. They've come back with a guilty verdict. Let me turn this down. My bad. So what's been up, man? How's Chi-Town going out there? How's the weather been out there? All good. That's what's up. That's what's up. All right, well, I'm going to start tonight's conversation, man. The jury has spoken. They've come back with a guilty verdict. I actually have audio and video of you said hot and rainy. Okay, yeah, it was a hot and rainy day today here in the D2. You know, and I want to give a shout out to my granddaughter Olivia West. She graduated from elementary school today, from 5th grade. So I just want to give a shout out to her. Able to see her do her thing today. So but yes, let's talk about this Karmelo Anthony trial. Are you familiar with this trial? We talked about this a year ago, Skeeter Man 218. Are you familiar with the situation? I have audio and video too of that situation. So let me get ready to share that to the screen. Hopefully I can play the video without it freezing up. So I've been having issues with hold on with my showing these videos and these videos freezing up. But yeah, Skeeter Man 218. Are you familiar with the Karmelo Anthony trial? And I believe the young man was Eric Metcalf. Not Eric, something. Last name was Metcalf. You know, and I invited a few people to come in. We actually did a show on this last year. Okay, well, we'll just go ahead and start the conversation. Actually, I'll go ahead and start up the conversation. This young man was at a track meet a year ago. And it was actually a rainy day that day, like how it was today. You know, they were at a high school track meet. Okay, yes, both families lost. And Skeeterman 218 says, yes, both families lost. It's a sad situation either way. Yes, I agree, man. You know, and for those who do not know what happened, both of these young men were at a track meet and it was a rainy day and they both were up under a tent. I forget I think his name was, I'll have to look it up again, but his last name was Metcalf. Approached Karmelo Anthony, the black guy, the white guy Metcalf. He approached Karmelo Anthony and asked him to lead a tent, you know, which it turned into an altercation. I believe the white guy literally tried to remove him by putting his hands on him. Karmelo Anthony pulled out a so-called knife or stake from his back and ended up stabbing the white boy. And the white boy ended up dying. So this has been an ongoing trial in the case for a year. You know, it's been like Skeeterman 218 said. You know, it was a loss on both sides. You know, and I'll show video and then I'll get back to my commentary. So hopefully this video will play. If it start to buffer or anything, I'm gonna just stop it and then we'll just do commentary. But give me 1 second. I'm gonna start off where. And I thought I had this queued up, but so yeah, you know what? I'm not going to even know. I'm gonna stop it and come out and we'll just give our I'll just do my commentary on that because I don't want to want the screen to be buffering or doing anything like that. Yeah, so today the verdict came back guilty verdict. I believe they gave the young man 35 years. You know, in my opinion, um, do I think that do I think the jury was a little bit excessive with the with the years? I, I'm kind of stuck in the middle of the situation. I thought in the beginning, and I'll just be honest, in the beginning, you should have the right to be able to defend yourself. You know, um, we spoke about this on the show last year, and I invited Joe back onto the show, and I invited DJ Shiny D to come back in, and Joe kind of explained that. He talked about it, he explained it right. You do have a right to protect yourself, you do have a right to stand your ground, but you don't have a right to stab and kill someone. So at the end of the day, this young man will have to face the consequences of his action. And that's where sometimes we fail in the black community. We do not handle, we don't know how to handle situations, meaning that conflict resolution. And this young man, he took another man's life, so you have to be able to pay for that situation. I'm not going to say he did not defend himself, but did it take deadly actions? And I'm gonna say no, because if the foot was on the other shoe, we would be asking for it. It would be an outrage too, So you have to look at it in both ways, But I will say this, Skeeter Man 218, and for those that's listening, you know, um, either way the verdict went, there was a lesson learned in this situation. And this goes for, white people and black folks. You cannot go around putting your hands on someone, because consequences like this may evolve. You cannot tell someone how to protect themselves, because this young man could have been frightened and scared for his life, and he took actions into his own hands, and then on the other hand, for young black men, we have to learn conflict resolution, because if it's a lot of our young men that's locked up now, going to the same place where this young man Carmelo Anthony is getting ready to go, and that's for prison for a long time, so and that's what and that's what this whole situation was about. Even on both sides, it should have been conflict resolution. And it's just a sad situation. It's just a sad story. But like I said, it definitely it should be a lesson learned both ways. You cannot go around thinking that you can put your hands on people, because sometimes it's not going to end like how you think it's going to end. And that's what happened to the young man. I believe his name was Eric Metcalf. He lost his life thinking that, he was able to put his hands on this young man, Carmelo Anthony, and there was not going to be any consequences, and he was wrong. He paid his life for that situation. And the same thing for the young man, Carmelo Anthony. Hopefully, hopefully out of this situation, he'll be able to, you know, um, learn some conflict resolution, because he's going to learn, it's going to be a lot of, conflict resolution that he's going to have to be able to learn, in these 35 years that he's getting ready to do. I want to, I need you guys' opinion. I need for you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Your boy is still approaching, 1K subscribers, and I cannot do without you guys hitting that subscribe button. But I need you guys' your comment and your opinion on this. Do you think the outcome would have been different if the jury would have been split like far as half and half, white juries or black jury? Because and I just recently talked about this. He was facing an all white jury, so in my opinion, he had no chance, to even win this case, so like I said, not too long ago, maybe a few days ago, we talked about this situation. I had a conversation where I thought that that the justice that outside of the black community, no one has outside of the black community, the lives of black people pretty much is not and I'm trying to get the name of the topic. Let me look this up. And I don't want to make the wrong let me here we go. I think I did a video about this, so I just want to get and I don't even have to look at the video. Basically, the question that I asked, I stated, I said, outside of in the court system shows there's no respect um or no concern for lives outside of the black community. And the court system shows it that way. Every time there's a situation with even with the shootings with the police, even what in this in this conversation stemmed from the Kim Child situation, the Asian store owner who shot the young man in the back. And like I said, it shows again with this Karmelo Anthony trial, and I spoke about it. We have to be able to get more of blacks on these juries, because our young men and women, they're going to face it. Now, if you're guilty, but in certain situations, man, we have no chances when we're facing all white jurors. And that's what happened in this Karmelo Anthony trial in this case today. Even if he was guilty, do you think the 35 years was substantial to what he did? Because he could have got manslaughter. People have gotten manslaughter and gotten less time. They gave this man 35 years. And we've saw white cops and store owners shoot black men and women in the back, and they walked away, and the shootings were justified. So you guys give me your opinion, give me your thoughts on this. I'm not saying that Karmelo Anthony was not liable for what he did, but did he deserve 35 years? Because again, we've saw officers shoot and kill black men, shoot them in the back, and it's been ruled justified homicides. So, but like I said, man, either way, this should be a lesson learned on both sides. You cannot put your hands on people thinking it's not going to be an outcome, thinking that the outcome is going to be what you think it is. You cannot tell no one how they're going to handle the situations when you're putting your hands on them. So and then on the other hand, with the Karmelo Anthony situation, we have to learn more conflict resolution. And like I said, it's a lot of men that's locked up in prison now for the same situation that Karmelo Anthony did. He did not have conflict resolution in that situation, and it's a bad and it's a bad deal on both sides. A young man lost his life, and another young man is going to prison for 35 years. So it was a sad situation. So I would love to hear you guys' thoughts, you guys' opinion on this situation. Like I said, we talked about this over a year ago, and and I will show that. I do have that queued up. So give me a second. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna play a little bit about that because we talked about that last year on the show. And I'll just play a little bit of that. Hopefully that doesn't not freeze up. And I'll play a little bit of that so you can get a feel of what I was talking about with my guests who I had on the show. So I'll play a little bit of that, and then I'll get back to commentary.
Degree.
Right.
But the thing about it is he acted in a way to protect himself.
No, he
And so
didn't. He did not act
get
in a
the
way to
truth.
protect himself. He didn't act in a way to protect himself. He acted
How
in a
can you
way.
say that? How you know that? How you
Right.
why you don't
I
think
want
he
to
said
welcome
something?
BJ3 to the
Well,
show.
how you doing, BJ?
What up? I'm just
Right.
saying he's speaking like it's facts. You know what I'm saying? Like to him, he was protecting himself.
I don't get to determine. You don't get to determine what you think is fair. The law is very clear. There's such thing as proportional force. You don't get to use a knife or grab battle. You have to give proportional force.
What
So my
size?
man,
What size was the cat that grabbed him?
huh? They both are athletic students.
And
Now
the
the height doesn't change the situation. They both are in the same. They both are the same category. They both athletes.
What was the white boy name? He was a middle linebacker, so he was a pretty decent size. I don't know the size of the black guy.
That don't change the situation. That was
100% it does.
I
100%.
mean, he could have been like he
Definitely.
feared for
Yes,
his
it does.
life, you know, at that
you know
point.
why
Yes.
no
Yes.
no no
100%.
that will only work.
100%.
I will at 19 years old, 17 years old, and a linebacker, and the other person that killed him was 80-year-old. That
So
defense
tell us
would
why
it
you
would
say
have to
that.
be it would have to be
Vulnerability.
vulnerability there. So they had to be like an 80-year-old versus a 30-year-old, and
It don't have to be that
old and
it's not
fragile.
true.
And high school students the same age, both athletic, that would not be a good defense.
So if you come up to me to rob me, and we the same age, same height, same whatever, and you rob, let's just say you put me all your money, and you got a knife to my neck, I can't use my gun and shoot you.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah,
He's saying there was
but
no weapon, so the other
one
person didn't have like a weapon.
one
I understand
happened.
what you're saying.
One have a
100%.
weapon and the other one didn't. That's not
Right.
proportional force. Sorry.
But I don't know that though. I don't know that. I don't know what he got on him.
Well, he didn't see it.
Okay, so
Nobody.
look. He was in the tent with the other guy's team. So
Yeah.
one guy grab you, snatch you up. It's 5, 10, 15. I don't know how many other men right the bench behind. So you can wait to get jumped, or I'm just
Yeah.
everything I'm saying is really disastrous, but in the circumstances, you look, it's much of stuff to you once.
More buffering than what I wanted
Versus another kid.
it
The
to
other
do. So give
kid.
me a second.
Well, that's
You
what it
don't think the
says
other
in
kid
the
was
police
behind
report.
him?
Okay, so yeah, I just want to show a little bit about that. We talked about this over a year ago, and we had a live panel. Both, it was kind of like a split panel. I brought Joe in. I had DJ Shiny D, and it looked like it was BJ3 that had joined us. It was like everyone kind of agreed that Karmelo Anthony, besides Joe felt like Karmelo Anthony was going to be guilty and was going to do some time. Me, DJ Shiny D, and BJ3, we also we agreed that Karmelo Anthony was defending himself, but at the end of the day, man, I was trying to give the young man benefit of the doubt. Because at the same time, like we see police officers and store owners, be able to shoot young black men in their back and get away and and it's always justified homicides. So I was kind of hoping that the jury would have saw some of the unjust that has been going on in the black community in the justice system and would kind of somewhat even this situation up. Because this young man did put himself in a situation where his life was took. But Karmelo Anthony will have consequences to his actions. The jury has spoke. They come back with a 35-year guilty verdict. And they said 35 years is what this young man is going to be doing. We have at Scared Wolf made a comment. Don't steal seems pretty easy. But yeah, at the end of the day, we all have a right to protect ourselves, and that's what that young man thought that he was doing. But at the end of the day, it's all about conflict resolution, because at the end of the day, we have a lot of young men that did not know how to do conflict or learn how to deal with conflict resolution is getting ready to go what this young man is going. In certain situations, and like Joe said, in the show that we did last year, his actions, the young man who put his hands on Karmelo Anthony, his actions did not deserve into being stabbed and stabbed to death, and that's what happened. So I would love to hear you guys' opinion, and please hit that subscribe button. Your boy is closing down on 1K subscribers. Give me your opinion. Do you think the jury come back with a right verdict? Do you think 35 years is justified for this homicide? In my opinion, it should have been more like a manslaughter. I don't think this was premeditated. And it goes, man. When you're not facing when you're facing an all-white jury, you know, situations is like this is going to happen. And we talked about this, you know, during that child situation, the Asian store owner who shot the young black man in the back, you know, and was found not guilty. You know, it goes on and on, always goes on and on, you know, for black men in this justice system. We always somehow seem to get railroaded. At Jeff Whaley said, now that's common sense, y'all, thumbs up. Are you talking about the jury at Jeff Whaley? You know, so in my opinion, man, I'm not saying the young man deserved to walk away, because at the end of the day, he did take another young man's life, and if it was on the other foot, you know, there will be outrage in the black community, you know, so he definitely deserves some jail time, but 35 years, in my opinion, it should have been more like manslaughter, you know, anywhere from like 5 to, you know, to 10 years, you know, in a situation like that. Okay, the conflict resolution. Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, man, that's what it was. And it actually was on both sides. There was no conflict resolution on both sides, you know, so it was a loss situation on both sides, you know, but I will say this, you know, it definitely should be a lesson learned on both sides. You cannot put your hands on a person and thinking that it's not going to be an outcome, you know, because it was an outcome. This young man lost his life thinking that he can go around putting his hands on someone, you know, and on the other hand around, this young man, Karmelo Anthony, should have used conflict resolution, because now he's getting ready to spend 35 years of his life possibly for not having conflict resolution. Mario George Burr, it's kind of, I don't have my glasses on, but Mario Wrestling said black men make up 7% of our population and commit over 53% of violent crimes. Can someone please explain that? See, and I would have to look up those facts, so I can't agree. But you know, we do have a lot of black men locked up for violent crimes. You know, and it comes back to what I was saying: conflict resolution. Most black men do not know how to handle conflict resolution. Big Ken, what up, though? Welcome to the stage.
What up, though?
What up, though, man? We got a few people watching us. You know, we were just talking about this Karmelo Anthony case. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened. Young black man ended up stabbing up a white boy at a track meet last year. We talked about this. We had a show on this. You know, give me your thoughts. Give me your opinion. The jury has spoke. They've come back with a guilty verdict, 35 years. You know, and I'll say this: at most, it should have been a manslaughter. You know, anywhere from 5 to 10 years, because at the end of the day, man, we see a lot of white cops. We see a lot of white store owners shoot black young men and men in the back and get away, and those murders are justified. You know, but give me your thoughts on this, man.
It's a lot of stuff going on out here, y'all. I just feel like, you know, they just had that Chinese man get away with killing that black kid, shooting him in the back for assuming that he stole something out of the store, and him and his son chased him down and he shot him in the back. So we got that going on, and we got this situation right here where a young man felt like he was being bullied and got to him so bad where he came back and he did something that he gonna have to live with for the rest of his life, right? He killed the young man, right?
No, hold on. Pause for 1 second. I'm not defending the murder. And you got 42. 42 is the lock. No, I'm not defending the murder. I said it myself. He had the right to defend himself, but was his actions what he did? He took the young man's life, and I said he was going to have to do some time. I'm saying 35 years, in my opinion. It should have been more like manslaughter type charges. So go ahead, Big Ken. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just had to come in and say, make a comment on what 42 is the lock said. You know, then I'm gonna read off the rest of the comments too.
Yeah, I just that's a tough
Cinnamon 0653 said, what do you know about the legal system? I know a few things about the legal system. So that's why I went to school for. You know, but go ahead, Big Ken. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, that's that's a hard one right there. I mean, ain't nothing you can say about somebody taking a life other than, maybe the punishment should be a little bit more lenient due to the circumstances. But wow.
42 the lock said how manslaughter. That's for accidents or heat of passion, not bringing a knife to a sporting event and stabbing in the heart when someone simply pushes you. I mean, at the end of the day, it was not. Look, that young man was in a tent. It was a rainy day. He did not go in there with the ill intent of stabbing nobody. He was protecting himself. And I'm quite sure if you really asked him, he did not mean to kill this young man. It was an accident. So, like you said, those are for accidents. So, if anything, it should have been, in my opinion, it should have been a manslaughter. Jeff Welly also made a comment too. He said, well, I don't see prison helping thoughts. 17 and a half years still parole. Yeah, hey, listen, at the end of the day, he's still going to get out, and be able to have some type of a life. It's hard for me to pronounce that. At Pat Paulson, 1108 said, no, he wasn't. He wasn't what? Protecting himself? But go ahead, Big Ken. We got the comments coming in so fast.
I mean,
my opinion suck ass. No, I'm just giving my opinion. I thought the young man was protecting himself, like how you have these store owners who just shot a young black man in the back for running out, and was damn near 100 yards away and was shot in the back, and it was a justified homicide, So look, shit goes both ways. But go ahead, Big Ken.
I mean, yeah, so like we just addressed that subject, and we know that he was dead wrong. There's no way that he should have got found not guilty.
Listen, the white boy could have walked away. He could have walked away too. I'm not taking up for Eric Metcalf. What he did, he took a young man's life. Even if it was another black man, that he did that too. It could have went either way. He could have walked. Both parts could have walked away. It was a loss on both sides. But the one thing, yeah, he was. And the reports, Pat Paulson, it said that young man was 100 yards away before that store owner caught up to him and shot him in the fucking back. So you tell me. So things, hey, look, shit happened. But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't think that this young man went into that tent, even though he had a knife or whatever it was, because I didn't see all the court proceedings. But
I believe,
the young man was stabbed
that
he was stabbed, and the young man died. So at the most,
yeah, that was unfortunate when you
like I said, manslaughter. Go ahead, Big Ken.
What he did was, when you attack somebody and you got a knife and you kill them, I mean, it speaks for itself. Even though the young man said he was being bullied, white, black, Puerto Rican, Jew, the way that's gonna go. So I said manslaughter. It should.
So I can't read all of them.
It should have been.
I'm not.
I agree with manslaughter. For sure.
I'm not agreeing with what the young man did. A life was
he did not go to intentionally kill him.
I don't know. Can you hear me, Big Ken?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, if this happened in the black community, it definitely would be a big outrage. So I'm not saying what this young man did was justified. My question to everybody is, does it deserve 35 years? Because we saw plenty of black men being shot in the back, being choked out, shot in the head, running away, and these murders have been justified. This young man got into an altercation, someone lost her life. If anything is all I'm saying, it should have been anything other than what happened. It should have been at least excuse me, I'm getting caught up in my words, but it should have been a manslaughter charge. We saw worse crimes happen and people walk away not being charged at all or with lesser time. So white or black, you guys have to just be honest about the situation.
The situation is horrible.
I mean to cut you off. We got a lot of comments coming in, and I'm trying to read them all off.
The situation is horrible. It just happened to be
I know the definition of manslaughter.
It just happened to be a black.
Look it up and read it out. But we saw less crimes. We saw worse crimes, like I said, get charged with manslaughter, and people walk away. like I said, with this whole Rick Child situation with the Asian man who shot the young black man in the back, that's a perfect definition.
Right.
That should have at least been a manslaughter. If
That
not
was
murder.
crazy. That was murder.
Yeah,
That was
so
murder.
and I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to just give my opinion on what I thought the young man did. I'm not saying that that young man deserved to die, but I'm not saying that this young man deserved 35 years.
No.
Especially what's been going on in the black community. We've been seeing young men and black men murdered after murder, shot in the back, and we've seen justified murders and homicides. Mario Breast, man, these comments are coming through so fast, but Future Clean said guilty as charged. Hey, it is what it is. And that's what I was talking about. Brandon Scott said he deserves 100 years. But unfortunately, he only got 35 years. This man will walk away and see some parts of his life. But on the other hand, the other young man who did not have conflict resolutions, who put his hands, who actually instigated and started this situation, he won't have a life to see again. And it should be a lesson learned on both sides. So hey, look, and I'm not saying what Karmelo Anthony did was justified, but I don't think 35 years was justifiable. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to hear you guys' opinion. Big Ken, go ahead, man. I'm just trying to read. It's a lot of comments coming in. Yeah, so go ahead, give me your opinion on that, and I'll come back and I'll read the comments later.
It's a real sensitive subject. Being that it's a lot of this type
and white
of stuff.
people are too goddamn touchy for me. Us as blacks, we see a lot of black people, throughout my lifetime be murdered and killed, and these murders have been justified. So, when a white boy who actually started the altercation get killed and his life's getting taken, you have a lot of white people that that want to speak out and don't see, the justice scales are uneven. Go ahead, Big Ian.
Yeah, it's sad, man. I hate it because ain't no wrong or right with this situation right here. It's
not. And Big Ken, he was against all white jurors. Give me your opinion on that. He was facing all white jurors, and blacks, we have to do a better job at getting people registered to be on these juries. That's where we're losing at. I talked about this in the show. We're losing that part of the battle, that part of the fight. We have to start seeing more blacks on these juries when we have blacks facing situations like this, because other than that, we're going to always see these type of verdicts.
How is that fair when you facing those type of charges and the people that
I'm not listen,
that's definitely
if y'all listening and paying attention to what I'm saying, I'm not saying he's innocent. I said if anything, he deserved a manslaughter charge. Go ahead, Big Ken.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what my wife just said, and I agree with her. If he would have stabbed somebody black, it would have just been self-defense.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
So that's what I'm trying to get these motherfuckers to understand.
That's why I said it's a real
white motherfuckers kill and murder black people and it be justified. Only thing I'm saying, right. I'm not saying that the Karmelo Anthony deserved to walk away because what he did is took another man's life. In my opinion, it should have been more like I don't forgot the charge that I said. It should have been like manslaughter, I should say. And that's all I was saying.
I'm gonna ask you this question right here. Was there reports of him being bullied?
You can't find 6 blacks to make it on time for court jury. And listen, and that should be a slap in the face of the black community. We have to do a better job at, like I said, registering and making sure that we get on these juries, because that's what happened to Karmelo Anthony. If the jury would have been split even, or the jury would have been more on the black side, I guarantee you it would have been probably like a manslaughter or a second degree. That probably was like a second degree, but it probably would have been lesser time, more than likely.
If it
Jeff
was
Weather
black
said
on,
that
if it was
requires you
black on
routinely to
black, it would
vote.
have
Pop
definitely
up. You
changed.
have a lot of blacks that vote all the time. With no felonies. These motherfuckers talking about making it seem like all blacks are felons and don't vote. You have a lot of people that are not felons that do vote. And those that are, we need to make sure that we start getting on these juries, because that's where we losing in the game. We're allowing, listen, I'm just gonna keep it real. We're allowing white people to judge us and our crimes to judge us. We have to start judging our own selves.
Yeah,
It's a lot of hateful comments in this comment section. But look, I need for you guys it's a lot of people watching, man. I need for you guys to make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Your boy is closing down on 1K subscribers. This is what we do over here on the What Up Though show. We talk about topics like this. We give our opinion. At the end of the day, you guys are acting like I'm not saying that this man should not have taken actions for what he did. He's going to pay for what he did, but at the end of the day, I don't believe his crime, what he did, deserved 35 years. Like I said, we saw worse crimes. People walk away with manslaughter type charges.
I mean,
it sounds like he didn't have a good lawyer too. But more than likely, man, it was just him fighting against these 12 white jurors. And that's it, man. We have to do a better job on getting on these juries. Go ahead, Big Ken. My bad, man.
I mean, that's going to have to be a retry, because how can he have a fair trial and it's all white jury? That's not going to happen. He couldn't have a fair trial. He need to have a retrial.
And that's all I was just trying to say to the people in the comments, man.
Yeah,
If it was a
there's
all
no
black
way
jury,
that he can have
and it came back and that he was not guilty or manslaughter charges, it would be an outrage in the white community.
I mean, I'm gonna give you. Let me say something, D. I'm gonna give you an example. In high school,
are you reading these comments, bro?
No, let me say this though. I went to school, and people did that all the time. They came back with weapons to fight you. It just
from
so
when I was
happened
told the jury was all white. I can actually even show the jury.
Yeah, because like I was saying, if the jury was all white, I mean, how could that be a fair trial?
There were 3 Indians on the jury.
This ain't on no racist shit at all. I mean, any race.
The final 12 panel alternates actually included Asians, Hispanics, and Middle Eastern individuals. And most of them all can consider themselves as Caucasians or identify when they vote as Caucasians.
Yeah, see.
He said the defense cost. And they did raise money for his defense, so he should have had a good lawyer. So at the end of the day, man, it was the jury saw what they saw. He got 35 years. So I'm not arguing that he was not guilty, for committing this murder, because that's what it was. I was just saying that this young man did have the right to defend himself, but it did not have to result in another young man losing his life. Yeah, hey, listen, he has to take accountability for what he did. And that's all I'm saying. But yeah, I need for you guys to make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button. Your boy is closing down on 1,000 subscribers. That's a goal that I set out here a few years ago when I started this show. This is what we do over here on the What Up Though show. We talk about situations like this that go on through the country, issues like this. And this really honestly should have not been a white or black issue. It was a situation where 2 young men got into a confrontation. One young man lost his life. And it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Both young men did not handle the situation with conflict resolution. And then when you have that situation, when you have 2 races against each other, that's what happened. A young man lost his life over both of these parties not knowing how to have conflict resolution. Because at the end of the day, that young man started this whole situation and lost his life over it.
And that's why there's no wrong or right in this situation. Somebody was being bullied, and we all know when you being bullied, it can be things that happen behind being bullied, like somebody coming back to try to do something.
Bro. I can't even see your face, begin.
Somebody trying to come back and do something to you because they fear you. That's just
what
it.
Happened.
If a person fears you, let me say this: if a person fear you, they will come back with a weapon to make it even if that's what they figure that they need to make the fight even. And I believe that that's what happened. You know, like I was saying, in high school, we see it all the time. You know, the security guards find knives and everything. People feel fear about the situation. Obviously, the young man felt like he was trying to handle the situation on his own, but he just destroyed his life by stabbing and taking somebody's life. You know, it's unfortunate. I don't care if he was green. It's sad. Our community get a bad rap for shit as it is already. About negativity in our community, but that was just a case of bullying going wrong, and two lives just got took. One young man probably who's to say that he is gonna ever get out of prison. We hope he do. You don't know how
No,
that's
he's
gonna
going to
go.
get out. They gave him 35 years, so he does have a date
I
where
mean,
he's going to
you
get
know,
out. He's probably probably like 20 now. I think he was 18. This happened a year ago, so he's probably like 19, 20. So that's what 20, 30. So he'll probably get out. What did I say? What did I say? He got 35 years. So just say he's 20, 30, 40, 50. So like 55
that's a long
before
time.
he'll be getting out. Yeah, I mean it's a long
You know,
time, but
but when you
he'll
take
be
somebody's
around our
life,
age when he get out.
when you take somebody's life, bro, like the young man said, whoever said 100 years, it don't really make a difference. It's just sad that it happened behind bullying. So everybody got an opinion. I don't think it's a wrong or a right opinion. Everybody's opinion, emotions is all over the place because it is a
Yeah,
white
everybody
and a black
emotions all
person
over,
involved.
and you hit it right on in the word, Big Ken. It's just it's everyone speaking their opinion, and that's all I'm doing. In my opinion, this young man was standing his ground, like how we see plenty of people who have stood their ground. In one cases for killing, innocent. I'm not going to say, well, yeah, I will say a lot of innocent black men were killed. And for justified standing your ground, and this is what this young man was doing. He stood his ground. He was protecting himself. At the end of the day, a young man lost his life. Do I agree that he probably should have walked away with no type of time? No. This young man took a life. And I'm not saying that this young man's life wasn't
You
valuable.
know what he did? What
And
he did?
he should do some type of time for his actions. Go ahead, Big Ken.
What he did was horrible. Was he left the scene and he came back and he did what he did.
No, he never
So,
left the scene. All this happened right there on the scene, Big Ken.
well, if all this, I'm sorry then, because I'm okay. If that's the case,
Yeah,
then
you have to say
what I was saying,
when the fight started and he was pushed, he pulled the knife out of his bag and stabbed him right there on the spot.
okay, so that's just self defense.
Yeah,
That's just self
but
defense,
it was two brothers that was coming at him.
and it was too. I would definitely get a retrial and fight that because that was simply self-defense. If you're listening to what you just said and what you said is correct, if I'm in a fight and I figure I'm coming to a threatening situation, I don't know if I'm finna get jumped or not. I'm bringing something to even out the odds, and that's what he did.
And
Um,
somebody made a good comment. It's hard for me to see. I don't have my glasses on today, guys. But he said black kids kill black kids in the inner city every day, but people don't complain like that when they get life. It's just racism against white people. And I agree 100%. That was a perfect comment.
I mean,
We're just
that's
seeing a lot of
basically
white
what I
folks.
just said.
A lot of white folks are just making, these racist comments, and just upset, and just being upset. I'm not saying that the young man did not deserve any time. I'm not saying that the young man deserved 35 years. That's all I was saying, in my opinion. Because you've seen white folks murder and kill black folks all the time and walk away free. That deserves 1,000 years.
If that's the case, that needs to be a retrial because how can you convict him of murder? I mean, I know somebody died in it, but it was a fight and he felt threatened more than one. I mean, I think even with the gun law, if you have a gun and more than one person, we were just talking about this, runs up on you and somebody in out there can check me if I'm wrong about this. You have the right to defend yourself with a
and these are
gun.
stand your ground states. Somebody
Yeah.
said at Joe Irvin 4109 said, Big Hen, why do you have the camera so close? I said that too, Hen. You got to back the camera up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go.
All right.
I've been telling you that.
I just feel like he was defending himself, period, point blank. I didn't know the whole circumstances of what happened from you just filling me in. If I'm in a fight and I got a knife with me and two people run up on me, I am defending myself. If somebody die, I will have to live with that later because I don't know how that was going to turn out if either one of them had a knife. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, because he could have felt like he was going to lose his life, and we hear these defense cases all throughout the country when it's when the shoe is on the other foot. This is the word that they scream so much. They fear for their lives. So when it's a young black man trying to use that same strategy or that same defense, it doesn't fly.
Yeah, I think he needed a retrial. He was just simply defending himself, and I'm quite sure that it was documented that he was being bullied before this incident. I hope that and pray that come out because I'm quite sure that's exactly what happened. He was being bullied. It happened all the time. You remember, D, when Deja went to school?
I can't give you one example of a white man stabbing a black man, but I can give you examples of white men shooting and killing and raping plenty of black folks and walked away with it. I definitely can give you that example. I can give you plenty of those examples. So you guys got to stop with these racist comments.
Yeah, they getting in their feelings
but I'm
with
quite
those
sure I can probably
comments.
look it up, and I'm quite sure it's probably plenty of white men that stabbed black men and got away and walked away with it.
You better believe it.
Yeah,
that's undocumented.
You can't say that, so stop trying to make it a racial thing, because I'm not, I'm not saying that I wish that young man would have not died. Like I said, it goes it goes back to conflict resolution, and neither side possessed that at that time. I wish Eric Metcalf would have had conflict resolution and wouldn't have and went and got an adult. Really at the end of the day, that's what shouldn't have happened. He tried to take matters into his own hand when he should have stayed in his place and went and got an adult, because at the end of the day, Karmelo had the right to be where he was at. Eric Metcalf is not security. At the end of the day, he made a wrong decision. He made a wrong decision by putting his hands on another man, and he lost his life. That should be a lesson learned for the next person that tries a situation like that. You cannot go around putting your hands on people and thinking it's going to be all good, because that young man lost his life. And that's saying that he should have, but situations like that happen all the time. We got 62 people in the building watching. I need for you guys to make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button. Your boy is closing down on 1K subscribers, and I cannot do it without you. Don't waste your energy on this case. Richard Murhead said, I'm not wasting my energy, man. We're just giving our thoughts and we're giving our opinion. I need for you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Give me your thoughts. Do you think 35 years was too much? Do you think this young man was standing his ground like how a lot of white people always scream the same thing, that they're standing there and standing their ground and they get away with justified murders? It's a lot of comments coming through. I can't read them all at once, but at the end of the day, man, like I said, this should be a lesson learned, for all kids. Listen, this should be put in some type of curriculum at school. You cannot be putting your hands on someone thinking it's going to go like how you're thinking it was going to go, because at the end of the day, this young man was bullied. Because I'm quite sure Eric Metcalf would still be alive. And I need for you white people to answer this question. Do you think Eric Metcalf would still be alive today if he would have not went over there and put his hands on Karmelo Anthony? Because I don't think Karmelo Anthony had those intentions when he was up under the tent. So just be honest. Do you think this young man would still be alive if he would have not put his hands on this young man? And that's really what it's about. It was about conflict resolution, and neither side possessed that. And that's a fact. I'm not gaslighting at all. That's a fact. Eric Metcalf, he lost his life by stepping out of his boundaries, thinking that thinking that he could control and do what he wanted to do, and he lost his life over that. A lot of people saying that's not premeditated. If it was premeditated, he would not be looking at 35 years. He would not be getting out. So you guys got to keep it real. It's a lot of white. Carmelo Anthony was trying to bully. It's a lot of comments coming in, so I can't read them all at once. It definitely wasn't premeditated. If someone touches these comments coming in so fast, I can't read them. But yeah, man, look, I need for you guys to make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. It's a lot of people here watching. We're just giving our opinion. I think 35 years, Big King, was too much for what this young man did. It was two young kids out there that that did not agree with each other, and they did not know how to handle conflict resolution, and someone lost their life.
I feel like from hearing everything that's been said that young man needs to definitely get a retrial, because that sounds like self-defense to me. At first, when I heard about it, I was thinking like maybe it was
premeditated. Listen, is it premeditated when the cop come to the scene and a young black man is running away and gets shot in the motherfucking back? Is that premeditated?
That's premeditated. That's definitely premeditated.
So you stop it with this bullshit. It's not premeditated. Premeditated is when if he would have came in there just stabbing up everybody. That young man was sitting up under the tent trying to get away from the rain like everybody else was. And Eric Metcalf brought this attention to him. And that's it. That's it. There's no premeditation. These comments are crazy. Listen, and we have to understand, this is how white people feel about us. Whether it's right or wrong, you just got to see this is how they feel. We know it's not premeditated. Are you reading the comments, bro?
I mean, I don't even have to look at them, because I could just about understand, they eat this type of stuff up. But when it happens to us, it goes up under the bus. But, hey, the young man was scared and he was prepared for whatever. That's how I'm taking it at this point right now. Like,
so what, he had a fucking knife in his bag. You don't know what he may have been facing, like on the way home from school. It could have been dogs or anything like that. At the end of the day, I don't think it was premeditated. I think that man was trying to get away from the rain, and that was it. Yeah, so man, all we're doing is giving our opinion. We're just giving our thoughts on this. At the end of the day, a young man lost his life, and a young man is going away for 35 years. So it was a loss on both sides.
Yeah, they both really lost their life. That's really what just happened. Everybody can make it a white or black thing, because I'm gonna say this again: if it was black on black, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, sadly. But we are.
All these motherfuckers keep putting premeditated. Not at all.
We can't change the fact that the young man lost his life. It's sad, condolences to his family, because had it been the black kid, what would we be saying then?
Yeah, if it was on the other shoe, none of these comments, we would not see this at all. None of you guys would probably not be over here in this comment section. At the end of the day, I'm trying to show some type of sympathy for this young man. He did not deserve to lose his life in that situation. And that's what it's about. It's all about trying to be fair and justice. I think the justice system, in that situation, they found him guilty, but in my opinion, I don't think he should be looking at 35 years. I think this young man was just out there scared. He was being bullied at that time, and he handled the situation like how he felt he needed to handle it. You can't tell a motherfucker what to do when they're attacking you.
That's it. You got to get a motherfucker up off of you. And that's basically what he did. And he killed him. That's why we talking about it. If he'd have just stabbed him in the shoulder, the neck, or not even the neck or the leg, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But somebody died. It's unfortunate, bro.
And that's all I'm trying to get everybody to understand. But you see how and this lets you know, man, how most whites feel, about blacks. They don't have any sympathy. Where was all the sympathy for this young man that was shot in the back by this Rick Child, by this Asian store owner? You know, where was the sympathy for the young man that was shot in the back, Ryan Hitton, you know, by the officers? You know, so all you guys are full of shit. You know, this young man, he did not have conflict resolution. He put his hands on this young man, and at the end of the day, he lost his life. You know, the whole George Floyd. Listen. If the cop wouldn't have put his motherfucking knee on his neck and held him down, he could have been smoking crack, fentanyl, and all that, and would have survived. You know, that shit came from a motherfucker putting his knee on his neck. So you can get the fentanyl, the crack, get all that bullshit out of the out of there, because that man would have survived all that. He was smoking crack and fentanyl before that shit happened and never died until that officer put his motherfucking knee on his neck.
Yeah, bro, you already know it's gonna be the ones that come and they coming,
So at the end of the day, man, sometimes we got to start taking justice into our own hands. At the end of the day, that young man paid his life for putting his hands on someone else. We see injustice, murders going on all day, with whites killing blacks, and I don't know why these motherfuckers are in the comment acting like like it's just like so unjust. The jury saw him guilty. I thought he was guilty of something. I don't think this young man should have lost his life. Not once do I think it was premeditated. But at the end of the day, Big Ken, this young man will be coming home to see his family one day.
Hey,
and I think that's what a lot of these motherfuckers are upset and making these stupid ass comments for, that this young man will be able to come home and see his family and will be able to have a family one day.
I mean, I hope you get another lawyer and get a retrial, bro, because that was simply him protecting himself. Anybody out there listening to this and had any comments and views on whatever they want to say, but anybody can say, and we all done brought weapons to a fight, whether it be a brick, a knife, a razor blade, or what.
Right. Half these motherfuckers walk around with half these motherfuckers that's making these comments now, probably walking around with a CCW and guns on them now. So y'all can stop it with all that bullshit. Listen, learn how to stay in your place. Don't put your hands. Listen, this should, like I said, this should be a lesson learned on both sides. You cannot put your hands on the motherfucker thinking that ain't nothing gonna happen. And at the other on the other hand, you have to have conflict resolution, or someone can lose their life. And that's it. There's no angry black man over here at all. We're good. We're just speaking our opinion and some facts about this case. That's it. But Big Ken, you gotta put your face where people can see you, big dog. Yeah, there you go, right there. But yeah, man, family can go see him. Yes, his family will be able to go see him. He will get out one day, and hopefully he'll be able to get good time and things like that, time served, and be able to get out of there sooner. You can't kill someone for touching you, period. Plenty of motherfuckers don't been justified for shooting people that didn't touch them. You don't have cops justified for shooting murders for people running away from them. So you can't say that. We see this all the time in the black community. So listen, these are just topics that we talk about over here, man. This is definitely not a racist channel. We just try to speak the facts that we see or give our opinion on these cases. That's it. This young man took someone else's life. In my opinion, I think he should pay some type of time for that. In my opinion, I just thought that I think 35 years was excessive for two young men at that. If he was an adult, because at the end of the day, and we all say, and we all know physics, young men, that he probably wasn't even using, he wasn't thinking right at that time. At the end of the day, so I'm not going to try to make up any excuses. He took another young man's life, and at the end of the day, he's going to pay he's going to pay with time.
I feel like he was definitely thinking right. He brought a knife, thinking that I might have to protect myself in any means necessary, and that's what he did. He just happened to kill
Somebody
somebody,
said
and
accept and embrace your racism. Man, I'm far from racist. I listen, I speak on white and black crimes over here all the time. And when you're wrong, you're wrong. That's it.
that's
You
it.
know, I don't give a fuck if you're purple. If you done something that was wrong, I'm gonna speak about it. And that's what we do over here. I'm not taking up, 100% for Carmelo Anthony. I think that he deserved to do some type of time because he took this young man's life. I don't think for being shoved or pushed or even being bullied, meaning deserves someone's life being taken. So you guys can stop it with that. I'm far from what you guys think. And I'm not gonna sit over here and keep trying to defend myself. It is what it is. That young man protected himself, and that other young man lost his life, and that's it. And I'm just speaking my opinion on that. And so is so is everybody in the comments. That's it.
There's really no other way to look at it. He was
Yeah, it was an
protecting
unfortunate
himself.
situation, but this should be a lesson learned. And you all out there that's in the comments, you should allow your kids to, hear about situations like this. Therefore, if they're faced with this situation, they'll know how to use conflict resolution. Because you have a lot of white boys and a white young black men locked up over not using conflict resolution. It's not a black issue. It's just a human issue. What happened out there, and that's it.
That's it.
That's it. So you have a lot of white folks in the comments trying to make it a black issue, but you have a lot of white folks that's locked up for stabbing motherfuckers that didn't use conflict resolution.
We don't been killed and hung and lynched for less. We not making it a issue.
Not at all. I'm just stating my opinion on. I thought the young man should at least get some type of manslaughter charges. Anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Like I said, we see this all the time where young black men is shot and you see people walk away, or it'll be a manslaughter type charge, and that's it. Yep. So yeah, we got the people weighing in. I want to thank everybody who made their comments. I would love for you guys to make sure you hit that subscribe button. Your boy is closing down on 1K subscribers, man. It's definitely been an interesting situation. The jury has spoke. They came back with a guilty verdict. This young man, and you can't say that he didn't have a suffice defense team, because they raised, I think, close to $1 million. So. At the end of the day, Big Ken, hopefully they will appeal this case, and he will get another trial. But at the end of the day,
he definitely needs to do trial, bro. I mean, I can't, from listening to what I've heard, you can't lock me up for the rest of my life. That's like, I'm 50 years old. So if you lock me up for 35 years, that's the rest of my life for me defending myself. I don't think so.
Yeah, and somebody said, I remember the poor Rodney King verdict. Now that was wrong. Yeah, and those cops, I believe they all got majority of them walked away or got like lesser, like manslaughter type charges, for taking this man's life. Blame his white lawyer. Hey, and you got to blame somebody at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, man, both of these young men, one lost his life. One is going to lose he's going to lose 35 years of his life, due to prison. So at the end of the day, us as parents, we have to do a better job at talking to our children when they're out here in society and facing situations like this. Because at the end of the day, I'm quite sure Carmelo Anthony's parents probably wish, if they did not have this conversation with him, they probably wish that they can take this, turn that back around and go back and have this conversation with him. Like, look, son, you cannot handle situations like this. It's one thing protecting yourself, but it's one thing, taking someone's life. But at the end of the day, man, I don't know why people are saying premeditated, because I think if that young man was out there trying to be on some real killer type shit, he would have stabbed that boy up multiple times, and he probably would have got at the brother. None of that happened. So you guys have to ask yourself that question. If you think he was out there on some premeditated shit, why didn't he stab him more than once? And then why didn't he go after the brother? It was a situation that happened. He reacted, and that was it.
I mean, to me, they charged him like it was premeditated.
Well, yeah, pretty much. You know that they did. 35 years is a lot. You know, but he'll be in his mid-50s when he get out. So he'll still be able to have a productive life. Look at these motherfucking comments. You know, but look, at the end of the day, man, I appreciate everybody, whether they were negative or not. You know, it just shows it just shows what type of character you guys are for making these racist ass comments, you know, but comments are comments. It's all good. You know, I just wanted to get everybody's opinion on this situation. And you know, and when you're dealing with race situations, it's going to be like that, you know, and I'm all for it. You know, I just wanted to hear you guys' comments. I wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on this situation. Like I said, the jury has reached a verdict and it was guilty. 35 years is what this young man is facing, Big Ken. So give me your last thoughts, give me your opinion on this, and let everybody know where they can reach you, Big Ken.
You can reach me on the What Up Though show, mainly on Freestyle Fridays. But this sensitive topic right here, subject about white and blacks. Like I said, you know, it's nobody winning in this situation right here. It's kind of like I'm almost stuttering to talk about it because you don't want to say one wrong word, but I'm just gonna say I feel like this
Hey man,
was,
say what you feel like you need to say. Don't whether you feel like you're offending someone or not. You know, because I'm gonna tell you this: these white folks are
I'm
going to
definitely
speak their
saying what I
opinion,
need to say.
whether they feel like they offending somebody or not. So fuck these racists.
No,
In these
I ain't
comments.
gonna sugarcoat it, bro. I'm definitely. It's just a real touchy subject, bro. So you
Yeah.
have to word things right, is what I'm saying. But in the black man's defense, he was pretty much in fear of what could happen if he didn't have a knife. I'm gonna say that.
Okay. Well, let everybody know where they can reach you, man. And go in there and you close it out. So look, I appreciate you coming on the show, giving your comments, man. And somebody else made another comment. They said they believe that he'll get time served, but I think he was already out before the trial started, so he may not get time served, but he may be able to do like they said, do half of his time and get parole. So hopefully that'll happen. He'll do half of his time and be paroled. You know, so look, at the end of the day, to me, it's not a white or black issue. It's a right or wrong situation. You know, a young man lost his life, and a young man is going to pay 35 years for taking that life. You know, so at the end of the day, we have to teach our young youth and our young men and women, you know, conflict resolution, because in my opinion, there was no conflict resolution in the situation. You know what I mean? And that's what happened. You had two young men that clashed and someone lost their life. So I want to thank everybody who made the comment. Hopefully you guys hit that subscribe button, hit that share, get it out here. And I just want to, like I said, again, I want to thank everybody who made a comment, whether it was racist or not. You know, everyone has a voice. Everyone has an opinion. You know, that's what we do over here on the What Up Though show. You know, we talk about topics like this all the time. So I want to thank everybody who was involved. It was a good show, Big Hen. I want to thank you for coming on. James Palmer said culture. Yeah, it's not the culture, man. It was just two young men who had a disagreement and someone lost their life. You know, so we have to learn conflict resolution. These youth have to learn conflict resolution. You can't not handle every situation with violence. And that's what happened, man. You know, so once the youth understand that, and once adults understand that, you know, because we have a lot of adults that's locked up over same situations like this, you know, so pretty much it's a human thing, man, you know, so it's conflict resolution. You have to be able to talk your way out of these situations, or otherwise someone is going to lose their life. You know, but it was a great show. It was a great conversation. And at the end of the day, man, hopefully this was a lesson learned for someone who's watching the show. So look, I appreciate everybody who made their comments, and please hit that subscribe button. Your boy is closing down on 1,000 subscribers, and I cannot do it without you guys hitting that subscribe button. So look, I want to, and Lyndon B. Johnson said, okay, the comments are coming so fast. I'll comment to all the comments after the show. But I want to thank everybody who made a comment. I want to thank you again, Big Ken, for coming on the show. It's another one. It's your boy Damn D, and we are out. Peace.